Good morning, everyone. So happy to have all of you here, the ones there in person and the ones through the internet. Thank you so much for being with us today. So today we are going to have Marco Magalhães. He's going to give us the lecture. He's going to be talking about Jesus Christ, which is the best because it's the first day of the month that we'll be celebrating Jesus Christ's birthday. And our first reading is going to be done by Daniel, and then our prayer is going to be done by Teresa. Thank you so much. Daniel?
Okay, I'm going to be reading about the book Happy Life. Natural occurrences in the process of human existence are considered misfortunes. The loss of loved ones, accidents with painful consequences, economic ruin, effective bankruptcy, earthquakes, and other cataclysms. Certainly, these are great problems, but not, however, real disasters except for the person who allows himself to be undermined by their effects, thereby destroying life's highest values. Knowing how to face these unpleasant phenomena, one can extract real value from them and be happy.
So let us all now close our eyes and let us all be connected with God, our Creator, with the Jesus, our God, all the benefactors here from TSS, that we need to be not only receive this light, but share amongst us this light as well. And Mark will be invited for the lectures today, so we can learn with him a little bit more of the love, charity, and fraternity that Jesus brought to us over 2,000 years ago.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you all for coming. So today we're going to be talking about Jesus Christ, which, as Sandra mentioned, perfect timing because we're starting to prepare ourselves for Christmas, and why not start the month basically having this look back and what actually Jesus Christ is for us, right? And the original idea was to talk about the aspects of Jesus as a consoler, but as we started reading and understanding more of what Jesus is, there's a lot more to that, right? And that's why we're trying to cover some of it today. Okay. For example, right? So we can think about Jesus as a teacher, right? And that's probably one of the most incredible and efficient and transparent and objective teacher we've ever seen or we've ever described in history anywhere else on this planet. Right? How he was able to captivate audiences, no matter how intellectualized or not they are, or no matter where they were, or the environment, or their background, or their knowledge. It doesn't matter. He was able to captivate and transmit his message in a very, very accurate and efficient way. We can think about Jesus as the consoler, as that individual that incarnated will actually allow everyone that is going through a hardship, who's suffering, who is going through a tough time, to look up to him and say, well, this is where I'm going to get my light and my love, and that's where I'm going to. And his own actions to support his words were really fundamental for us to believe, right? You can think about him as a doctor, for example, right? You can think about him as the doctor of the soul, of the spirit, of who we are, right? How he was able to mend, to cure, to help, right? Not only us as broken souls, but our physical bodies too, right? Now, if you think about that, it is important, particularly because we're December now, to think about if we're celebrating the birth of Jesus, let's say, right? Historically speaking, when Jesus incarnated in this planet, that is one episode, obviously, that is the main idea behind Christmas. But the most important question is that, is Jesus born to you? Right? Because there's a symbolism to the idea of Jesus being born, right? And you can think about when in your life did you accept, right, and incorporate and internalize the message that Jesus brought to us? When was that day that you thought about that in yourself and say, okay, this is the day Jesus was born in my life? Because if you think about the birth of Jesus as the moment in history where the law of love is now symbolized into that message in one person, and is propagated from there to touch every single person in this planet. Now, if you think about ourselves now, when was that day that love sprouted inside of us, and we make the connection with Jesus? Because it's easy to talk about Jesus as like that incredibly elevated spirit that incarnated in this planet, but distancing ourselves from him at the same time, right? In other words, we know what he represents, we know what he says, but at the same time, I feel that I cannot get close to that. That's too much for me, you know? I'm not perfect, I'm broken, I'm this or I'm that. So we create, at the same time we recognize him, we create barriers that almost like impedes us from doing exactly what he wanted us to do. Right? What did Jesus want us to do? Jesus wanted us to wake us up, all of us, collectively, to what really important things are in life. That's this whole mission, right? And although we now can recognize and say, Jesus brought the law of love, but is the law of love existing? Because if it's not, we're not connected to whatever he represents, what the real message is. So the big question to all of us, and we're going to talk about this the entire morning today, is like, is Jesus born inside of you? Or in other words, did you finally make the connection that Jesus wanted us to make several thousand years ago? Because the day he was born, like, it really doesn't make a difference, right? Historically speaking, we can't tell. Right? The calendar has changed. History has mended and bended and reanalyzed in many different ways to say it was this day or that day or this time or this solstice. Does that make a difference? Zero, right? If it was in, year 4, year -6, it doesn't make a difference, right? But the birth really of Jesus represents the moment in which that we comprehend and we connect and we allow ourselves to be part of this dissemination of the love life. That is the day Jesus is born. And then we're coming now into December. This is a time that it's critical for us to think about that, right? Into each one of our lives, right? And there's interesting, I'm going to mention this later on, but if you think about this, for example, I'll give you one example. When Paul at the time, right? When he sees the light, remember that, like this passage right there, of Jesus that basically blinded him, right? If you ask Paul, as a spirit today, it's like, Paul, when was the day Jesus was born in your life? That was the day. The day that by being close to that emanating, incredible source of pure love and energy, he was touched to the point that he changed. And he was not the same person ever again. He changed his name. He changed who he was. He changed his, he reconnected to his goal in that moment of his experience was to be the word of Jesus by action, by traveling, by being out there, by being that person. The example of the transformation, right? If you think about any figure, any person, any well-known spirit in the universe, there will be moments in life that Jesus is born to them, right? In other words, Jesus is, we really recognize what our missions are, how connect, how we sprout that message of love inside of us. And this is what basically December brings to us, right? It's a good time. We should do this every day. But this time of year, I would say we can focus more on that, right? Because we need to recognize that. And if it already happened to us, let's celebrate it. And if we're struggling to make that happen, let's make it happen faster, right? Right? And if you never thought about this, this is a perfect time to start, right? Why not today? So, in the book, Jesus in the Home, right? Chapter 9, there's a very interesting story that it talks about, you know, how Jesus explaining to us how the message of God was being sent or delivered, right, to us. Right? And Jesus, in the company of all his disciples at the time, right, he's having this conversation, and Jesus starts saying this. So many years ago, and obviously he's telling this as some sort of a hypothetical story, but you'll see that is actually pretty much real story. Many years ago, when the world was in grave danger, he starts, calamity, death, you know, ignorance, wickedness, right? God sent a messenger of knowledge, right? And the message of knowledge was supposed to come and deliver to us the knowledge that we needed to overcome the calamities, right? So people were lost. So God was delivering knowledge for us to deal with that, right? And this love, the first messenger of knowledge that Jesus sent, and he continues, right, was supposed to deliver this beautiful message of life eternal, right? Of the importance of knowing that we're all going to grow and develop and get better. When this messenger came to this planet, right, he incarnated, and he took up work as a teacher, right? And as a teacher, he started to get really interested in literature and sciences and knowledge, right? He was a messenger of knowledge. But he fell in love with just the intellectual component of it and slowly disconnected from his real mission, right? That was to go and reach out and grab hands and help those that were in need. So he grabbed all this beautiful intellectual perspectives of the knowledge, and he ignored the fact that if you don't deliver that to people, it makes no difference. So he works exclusively distancing himself with like this disgust from crowds, unlearned, right? He starts to see the people who did not have knowledge as inferior to him, right? So distancing himself is like they don't know, right? I know, right? So you can clearly see that by being this inaccessible source of intellectual or knowledge, he failed, right? Couldn't do it. So when we failed completely now, so God, and this is Jesus explaining to the disciples, right? God decided to send another messenger of knowledge. And when this messenger of knowledge incarnated, he took the job as a doctor, right? The original idea was to help others, right? To go out there and support and help and bring knowledge and help. But then again, he fell very, very close to the concept of, you know, helping just a very few percentage of the population that were able to financially support what his knowledge was, right? So pay for his work, right? Distancing himself from the broad community that needed his help. So he fell in love so much with the knowledge, scientific knowledge of the process of being a doctor, that he forgot the entirety of everything else he needed to teach to as a human being. Right? So the common person, the guy that was suffering somewhere in the streets, could not reach to him. Right? So didn't work. So God sent another type of messenger of knowledge. This one became a warrior, right? With that entire power of knowledge in his hands, he said, yes, I'm going to go there. I'm going to force my knowledge into a lot of people, right? Like force. Didn't work, right? By going out there and attacking, beating other people, when with the vengeance developed, the angry behavior developed, like all those feelings that tainted, right, the original source of knowledge he was supposed to deliver. So whatever he was trying to deliver got completely lost and was transformed in some sort of dictatorship, right, where his flaws became more evident than the message. So he conquered a lot of people and he failed all of them. So didn't work. So God sent yet another individual to be a messenger of knowledge. Right? This one took on the role of being a musician. Right? So now, working as a musician, he was supposed to use that as a tool to deliver, to access, to reach out. But instead of that, he became really, really connected to the beauty of this incredibly complex compositions that only could reach the ears of very few selected people, right? So he became, what Jesus says, intoxicated by this specific lavish and rich halls, right, concerts. And again, by doing that, he would be exceptionally separated or disconnected, right, with exactly what he was supposed to deliver. He believed he was so good. What he did was so elevated and was almost like reaching the notes of divinity, that feeling, that idea itself, separated the entire knowledge that he was actually supposed to deliver, which is the one of love and charity, right, and helping one another. So he again separated himself as this super powerful, almost a deity of perfection, right, to hide the fact that he failed bitterly on his message. So Jesus continues, right? So instead of just repeating that, so God said, I'm going to now send a messenger of love, not knowledge. So this individual did not have this incredible intellectual capabilities of the other five that was sent before. But instead, he was able to connect to people. Right? And Jesus continues and says, with great mercy, this messenger was able to reach the four corners of the world. He felt compassion for the teacher that failed his message. He felt compassion for the doctor, compassion for the warrior, and the musician. At the same time, he felt mercy for the misfortunes of all the crowds. So determined to work in God's name, this is now Jesus explained, he became the diligent servants to all, including the individuals that came to send knowledge and failed everyone. He began to work for the common good and identifying the people whom he had to come to serve first. So he began to work on that, and then he forgave infinitely and repeated the same effort, the same lesson 1,000 times over that the teacher couldn't do. but he reached out to every single one of them and allowed them to be better on their own jobs. If he was humiliated or persecuted, he tried to see the offense as a beneficial challenge to his ability to perform his duties. He could bear witness to his trust in his Father who had sent him, in order to love his brothers and sisters in struggle without holding back. Many times he was compelled to pray for help from the heaven above, faced with claws of slander and sarcasm. Nonetheless, Jesus continues, he found in the lowest manifestations of human nature even more reasons to dedicate himself to those individuals. Look at this. So the messenger of love coming and seeing what was happening, he found in this, think about the most absurd, lowest manifestations of hatred and whatever you can think about, whatever was happening to humanity at that time, the messenger of love would see that and use that energy to fuel his own energy to help them. In other words, the worse it was, the more he felt energized to help them more, because he realized that these individuals all needed more and more help. Sounds familiar, right? Actually, Jesus is talking about his own mission and the many others that came, different spirits in different places in different time, that fell through that exact same plan, right? They came as messengers of love. And we know many of them in many cultures and religions, right? And how many times Jesus prayed? Remember, he's explaining exactly what he's doing, right? To help us, right? So thus, he continued, it was that by making himself the least of all, he was able to light the renewing flame of faith in pure kindness in the hearts of every single earthly creature, uplifting them to the highest level, thereby winning a complete victory in the divine mission to which he had been entrusted. And then he continues, there was a slight pause in the sweet words of the Messiah. And then the light of the calm that had spontaneous came over from that noisy, bustling room. He concluded with an expressive tone in his voice. Education and sanctification represents inseparable forces towards the Spirit's glory. Knowledge and love are the two wings that angels that have reached the divine throne. But far and wide, those who love are far ahead from those who merely know. That's how it is. So this message cannot be more timely. Because most of us here and the internet and anywhere today, we kind of know a few things already, right? We may not be experts, but we have some knowledge. We have an inherent seed of knowledge inside of us that kind of gives us a hint of what are good things and what maybe not good things, right? What should I do? And maybe what should I not do? That's our conscience. And in some cases, we know a bit more because we already read the Bible or the Gospels or the story of Jesus or Kardec's works or in other religions, whatever they're reading. So we have some sort of moral background to understand a little bit knowledge, right? But what should I do, what should not do, and have that moral compass, right? But do we love? That's exactly what Jesus is telling us. Or are we one of those messengers of knowledge? They're hanging out here, completely steering away from what we're supposed to do, right? Instead of loving first, right? That's the message of love, too. Because as Jesus says, the ones who love in action. In other words, like being kind, talking, reaching out. I'm not saying, what Jesus says that, he's not even asking you to do what the disciples did. Like, they gave up their families, their lives, everything. They started to roaming in the desert behind this guy that doesn't know who it is. They're not asking that because, they kind of know that most of us would not take that right now. And we'll probably look at the disciples and say, oh, this guy's completely insane, right? How can you be fishing one day to get food for your family? This guy walks down the beach and say, hey, come with me. We're going to transform the world. They're going to say, sure, yeah, I'm going to go. I'm just going to dump all my stuff, right? And I'm going to say bye to everyone in my family because I'm going to be like several years away from home, hungry and kind of walking around barefoot, talking to people, being lynched or something. It's going to be a great journey. I'm definitely going to go, right? That's what he did, right? So Jesus already knows that we are not there yet. In other words, taking that incredibly difficult decision, we're not prepared for that yet. So that's why those decisions don't come to us on a regular basis. Right? Remember, those challenges only happen to those who are ready for it. So the fisherman that would say, oh, there's a simple fisherman, non-educated. No, this incredibly evolved spirit for their times. Stop this nonsense of thinking they're not, they're just random people. They're not random people. These are spirits that dedicated ages of evolution to be in the stage that could actually interact with Jesus and actually follow him. Because we are not there yet. We're not. That's why Jesus is bringing this to us, and he kind of hammered this in our heads. It's like, the ones who love are far ahead of those who know. Right? Because those disciples, they did not have the knowledge that, the mathematicians or the musicians had, right? But they loved. They believed. They had faith. Where are we in that story? Right? That's what this story from Jesus in the home here brings to us so close. Is that imagine if Jesus is telling this story right in front of us. Where would we be in that story? Right? What actions are we taking right now to move towards what Jesus is telling us? Okay. So there are so many ways of doing this, right? And obviously me talking here, I'm definitely not an expert or an incredibly elevated being that will tell you here is like, yeah, let's be all this and pray and be a saint every day. No, because we're not. I'm not, right? But there are tiny little things that we can probably start doing and make it a routine. How about just respecting people that think differently than us? Right? Knowing how to exchange ideas without trying to punch each other. That's a good start, right? How about reading a comment online and not throwing these darts of the energy that you want to picture yourself attacking someone that has actually happened. If you're reading something online and you're thinking in your thoughts something really, really negative about the person writing that comment, it's actually the same thing. He's actually doing it. You're just not seeing it. But your thoughts are real. They have weight. You actually project that into that person. The person feels it. And I can guarantee you, they're going to send it back to you. Exactly that type of energy. So that becomes a cascade of nonsensical negativity. Chico Xavier, remember what he did when that started in his head, right? When his neighbor killed his dog, right? There was this tiny little start of this being upset about what happened, right? So Emmanuel came to him and said, just figure out whatever that person likes and wants the most and give to her. So that motion of goodness towards that person will bring back to you more goodness. Isn't that easy? So he did. And there's this beautiful description of the energy that is exchanging between the neighbor and Chico, right? Of when he's giving that gift, right? The neighbor, all the negativity, everything kind of dissolutes and then becomes a bond again of good things, right? Am I saying that we don't need to have an opinion? No, I'm not saying that. Of course, we have opinions. We need to voice things. We need to be concerned about things. Of course we do, right? But we don't need to tie that with anger, with, the idea of being like attacking or injuring or, this negativity towards the other person. That we don't need. We definitely don't, right? When you're seeing someone who apparently is in stress or distress, reach out, talk to people, right? We don't do that anymore, right? We don't. This week, I had an opportunity, which was very interesting. It tends to happen quite often. Out of nowhere, in a scenario that I don't expect, I see someone, and I immediately comes to my mind like I need to talk and I need to help this person. Not random in my eyes, completely organized and orchestrated by the spirituality, right? So I approach, and then in 3 seconds, the person starts to cry and tells me about exactly what happened. And I'm like, okay, thanks, I know, I got this one. See, I say no to 99% of the opportunity, but at least 1% I do something about it, right? So here I am doing something about it. And I think I was able to help that person to a point that in the end, the person actually said to me, is like, thank you for this. This has been very helpful. And you can see that that person was going probably in a pathway that she was going to harm herself at some point, right? And maybe 5 words that I said were able to drift that person back to some sort of acceptable stress level, right? I did not cure her. No, not at all, right? But these little seeds of light that are in the path of so many others and happened to us before, this is what Jesus is telling us. Like, do you love? Because that's loving action, right? At your work, when something happens, something that is not okay, something that's upsetting, like replying to that email in 3 seconds does not help. You're just going to send an email charged with the same angerness and bitterness that the whatever situation is. So basically, you're contributing to more and more calamity and stress. Why don't you take a break? Why don't you think about why that's happening? And maybe reply the next day when your mind is not connected with so much stress and anxiety and negativity, right? How about we learn to control those moments where that deep-rooted feelings, negativity are still inside of us, they kind of like they flourish a little bit more. Let's try to think about them, right? Control them, learn with them, right? Instead of sending them right back to that person, because that is not helpful. See, this is love. That's what Jesus is talking about, right? So little things, if we can control ourselves, we can do better. We can talk. We can reach out, right? Say hi, right? Maybe say sorry without saying sorry, trying to punch the person in the face. That's a good start, right? Because sometimes we're saying sorry, it's like, sorry, sorry. That's not sorry. You're being so angry. Why? So Jesus is really bringing to us this daily question, right? Of, if you are here, we have a reason to be here. And we don't need to be too complicated about it, right? It's not that we can just say, I need to do this, this, and that. And no, start with the basics, with love and respect, caring, like charity, which is love in action. So if you look at the examples of Jesus now, like let's look back at his existence here with us. And this is from the book Palavras da Vida Eterna, from Chico, right, Emmanuel. Emmanuel is going to tell us, right, through all the circumstances, we found Jesus interested above all in the loyalty to God and service to man. He did not require a golden crown for his earthly life. He gladly accepted the humble, laborious childhood. He embraced fellow servants without asking them for a certificate of holiness. Right? It's like, some religious institutions out there, and I'm including Spiritism too, right? They're like, oh, you try to somehow separate individuals with this sort of certificate of perfection of holiness. Like, this guy, yeah, this is a very good individual, but this is not good. Or this is very knowledgeable, this is not very knowledgeable. Oh, this guy is an incredible speaker, but he said one thing that was wrong in his lifetime, so I'm not talking to this person ever again. Right? We do that. We do. See, we're taught not to do it, but we do it, right? All the time. So that's what Jesus is talking about, right? Because Jesus, when he presented himself here in this moment, he was not there with the elites and the super smart people. It's like, hey, come here, camaraderie. Let's fix these problems, right? From the top down. No. What did he do? It's like, I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to talk to that guy, that woman that has been accused and stoned to death because she's been accused of adultery or something like that. So he was there, right? With people that society didn't want to talk to. Because it's exactly the opposite of what we expected as a leader, right? That is shocking to the society then, and it's still shocking to us now. Because although we know that story, we actually don't somehow connect to it, right? And we still want to be, with the top brass type of level attitude, like, yeah, I'm really good, I'm really holy, right? But we forget that the action needed is with the little people, like day to day, like in your work, in your way to work, in your home, right? In your community, right? In your country, right? In your thoughts, right? When you're reading something, right? All of this. This is what Jesus wants. And those of us who are far in more hardship and worse shape than we are, those are the ones we need to be close together, right? So what have we actually done to help people in need recently? I don't need answers. Just think about it, right? What have we done, right? And obviously we've done one or two things, three things, I don't know, you could probably think about this, but can we do more? And the answer is always yes, right? In any scenario. So, and then Emmanuel continues, right? So Jesus never goes against established authority. In a way, like, and he's clear about this. He said this. I did not come to break the law, right? I'm here to show you what the real law is, like to show by my own actions, right? He didn't need to start, like the other disciples wanted to start some sort of revolution, right? When you remember the idea of the Judah, like the treason and all that stuff, the reality is that they wanted to mobilize people to take up Jesus as this martyr of revolution and take over the entire political and financial system at the time. But Jesus never wanted this. He was very clear about this. Right? So Jesus works in the idea of extinguish cruelty and hypocrisy. Right? Delinquency. But in no time hurts men where they're suffering those difficulties. Right? He wanted to eliminate all those things, but he was not there slapping the hands of those who were doing it. He was reaching out, right? And say, okay, let's walk this path instead of that one that you're in. Right? He's misunderstood by many others, right? He never expects a reward. Not even the ones that come in sympathy or understanding. He suffers the ingratitude of the beneficiaries, right? Without any idea of revenge. Like imagine, like when you go help someone, and that person that you help turns back at you, and you're like, that guy, you helped him. He never said thank you, and now he's doing this against me. It's like Jesus was like, poor guy, right? Let's help him more. That's what Jesus was saying. We're doing the opposite, right? We want to go there and take back everything that I help him, I'm going to take it back. Revenge, right? That's what comes from mind, right? All the time. Jesus receives undue condemnation and is subjected to the torments of the cross without appealing to justice. And no one was freer than him, free to continue serving and loving through the ages. This is the idea of real freedom. Right? When are we really free? When all the laws, the divine laws of God, are so much inside of us that we don't need to follow the laws. We are the representation of those laws. So that's Jesus. So was he free? 100%. He was free, right, as a spirit. But very different from what we think about freedom. Freedom, we think about a freedom like saying what I want, doing what I want, going where I want, right? But the real freedom is very different from that, right? Because that freedom is limited by the freedom of every other person. So the real freedom only comes when all of us, united together, have all the laws of God inside of us to a point that I don't have to think about them anymore, right? Some laws are easier to do that, right? Some things we already know, right? We can already kind of assume that most of us don't want to kill another person. Most of us, right? Because that is already kind of inside of us, right? We don't have to fight off, like, okay, I understand, I get that, right? But being in a situation that, maybe it's a tiny little thing that you want to do wrong, maybe there's no one looking, right? We're still tempted to do things that are against the law, right? And we have to fight them off, right? So that's the difference between having the law inside of us and still being punished by breaking the law, right? For example, imagine that we had all highways without any sort of surveillance, no police, no offices, nothing. Would you go by the limit posted all the time? Just think about it. You don't need to raise your hand and answer. Just think about yes or no. I'll say most people would say no. They may say yes here, but when put in an empty highway without any sort of knowing for sure that nothing was going to happen, right? And just allowed to go, it's very likely that you're going to drive well above the posted limit, right? Because, you see, that law is not inside of you anymore. Not there, right? So you have to deal with the consequence. You do it because there's a consequence, right? We still have people that don't use seatbelts. Seatbelts were struggle, right? In the beginning, people were like, "Oh, I'm taking away my rights, my freedom. I can't be tied to this car." Yeah, that's exactly what happened. People revolted against seatbelts when seatbelts were implemented, right? Now most of us would do it almost automatically, right? Go to the car, put a seatbelt, like, okay, fine. Because for most of us, we don't need that law anymore, right? It's almost like, yeah, I know, this is good for me, for others, right? It's a safety thing. See, we incorporated the law inside of us. But for other things, the law is still very, very far away, right? And we need a reminder, a slap in the hand, right? To make sure we do it. So the divine laws are the same, right? So some divine laws, we can do it, right? We already have it inside of us, right? But let's say, this example here, when you help someone and that person had chosen gratitude towards you, how many of us will say, yeah, let's forgive and let's help again, right? I'll bring most of us will probably say no, right? But that's what Jesus is telling us, right? That there's going to be a point where we're going to go beyond that, right? And realize that we have to forgive 70 times 7 or a million or infinite times, and we need to help infinite amount of times, right? He's going to get there, right? That's what Jesus is telling us. So through all circumstances, we find Jesus interested. When we talk about the loyalty of God, and most importantly, when we think about Jesus in the sense of the doctor, the consoler, the teacher, the brother, right? This individual, the Spirit of Truth tells us a very important message in the Gospel according to the Spirit, in chapter 6. The Spirit of Truth brings this. O Spiritists, love one another. This is the first teaching. Educate yourselves. This is the second, exactly what Jesus told us there, right? All truths are found in Christianity. The errors that have become rooted within it are of human origin the Spirit of Truth recognizes that a lot of things we think about in Christianity today are completely different from what Christ tells us to do. Like, it's obvious, right? No question about it, right? What he's saying is that if you really think about Jesus himself and what he's done, right, you have the moral sense or the compass to know that we've done a lot of things wrong in the name of Jesus. Period. We still do, right? And then he continues, brothers and sisters, nothing perishes. Jesus is the victor over evil, and he's the word of love. He's the representation of love, right? So he continues. I have come, and I once came amongst the wayward children of Israel to bring the truth and dissipate the darkness. Listen to me. Spiritism, as my word of old, must remind us believers that above the rhymes of immutable truth, the good God, the great God who makes the plant germinate and raises the tides, I have revealed the divine doctrine, and like a reaper, I have gathered into sheaves the good scattered amid humankind, and have said, come unto me, all you who suffer. So that's Jesus. So Jesus is telling us all the time, the consoling aspect of Jesus is what really drives most of us, right, in the end of the day, right? When we're hardship, we're in a tough time, the days we're crying, we have, we're not okay, and we need, so think about Jesus, because he's right there with us all the time, right? Although we usually block that help, right, by our own thoughts and actions, if we really reach out through our minds and our thoughts, we're always going to have the help we so desperately need, right? And just to finalize now what we had to talk about today, Chico Xavier once wrote also, as in the past, some still have their hearts closed as the resting inns in Bethlehem. I remember when Jesus was born in that, right? That they had no support, they had nowhere to go. So open your heart with love and humility to offer everything necessary for the birth of Jesus. When we talk about the birth of Jesus for us, right? And in others, right? So seek urgently to get him to be born in your lives. Because when that happens, we'll finally understand Christmas and the truly find of the light. Right? So, just to end, I'll have to say, Merry Christmas to everyone, and let's maybe use this time of year, right, to think about Jesus being born in our lives and helping and facilitating that, and not only that, facilitating the concept of Jesus and the love being born into everyone's life, right? And it doesn't matter if you believe or don't believe, or if you're not religion, it doesn't matter, because every single person, because we're all created the same and equal and from the same God, we all know that the concept of love is universal, right? Easy. You can approach anyone and say, we should respect each other. Everybody, right? Does anyone say, no, we should? That's some people. Most of us know, right? So we'll say, we should love one another, or do unto others what we expect people to do unto us. Like, most people recognize this, and we shouldn't have any trouble helping people flourish that idea inside of ourselves, right? So that is the real message that we have for Christmas. Thank you all.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you for this beautiful lecture that really sets the tone for this month of December when we celebrate Christmas. We were talking about when the moment of transformation happens, when we really wake up for those laws. And I was thinking about that, for some of us, it may be a very clear moment, so when it becomes bold, this moment, it makes me just from now on, I'm a different person. But also, I think for some of us, and sometimes we think you need to have the aha moment when it happens. It's and I think for most of us, it's not an aha moment. I think it's just something that gradually happens. Because sometimes you keep thinking, there are times I have that one moment that wakes me up, it's not gonna happen. It is already happening, it's happening slowly. I think for me, and some of us go through an experience, say, wow, when I went through this experience, I had this illness, or I did this trip, or whatever it is, it completely changed. But I think to most of us, it's just something that's subtle, it's slowly. It's the moment that little things that start to happen with us that adds up and it makes us to start to rethink and connect more and more with this.
So yeah, and this is a great example because for me, so I would say it started to happen the first time I actually went into a spiritual center to learn, which was actually not too long ago. It's down in Mont, I think, in New York when I was there. And I've been in a spiritual center many times, but as usual, just to go in there and kind of, get passes and drink some water and like walk out. Zero connection, kind of not really fully aware of what's going on, right? So, and Joyce got this idea, right? She was like, we gotta go to a spiritual center. I'm like, why we're why are we gonna do that? We're here in New York, And she's like, yeah, we should. I said, yeah, maybe we should. And just like this thing, like, I don't know, maybe we should go, right? And we reached out and we found the spiritual center not too far from us. And the day we walked in, this incredible guy, Adriano Barbo, his name, is back in Brazil now. He's a phenomenal person and, inspired me so much. He welcomed us and said, we were waiting for you. Like, like you're late, what are you talking about? And from that moment on, it slowly, but not a single point, but it slowly transformed our existences completely, right? So we got engaged, we studied, we started learning, and then we started to realize, oh my God, how much, like I'm wasting my time big time, right? So I need to catch up. So I need to do so much more. And I think that opening of our eyes was when I realized the first moment, like Jesus was kind of coming in my life a little bit, and still, right? It's not that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm wanting to. No. Like, of course not, right? We're far away from that, but it's a tiny thing right there.
And even in some ways, if you think about Paul, yeah, I had that aha moment, like a big one. But if you think he also was put seeds, because he could have changed before when Abigail spoke with him.
Exactly.
Yeah. That was the first like, so wake up, and he's like, it made him think. He's like, no. And then when he Stephen doing the lecture,
exactly.
it touches him like greatly. Like he really like.
Yeah.
There's something here, but still like no, because his pride still spoke loud, and then they had the emotion like no, so it's like now it's time, now let's go. But it's just to have this, we have sometimes to do not discourage ourselves waiting for that moment. I think because that one big moment didn't happen, it's slowly, right? It can't happen. I know we don't have any questions on the internet because it's just there, but there's any comments or any questions here from everybody that's here present. No? Okay. So Marco, thank you very much. Thank you very much for everybody that was with us over the internet, and we're hoping to see you here next Sunday.
Thank you.